Later, in the eastern United States, he presided over the branches of the church. An able writer, he penned essays, editorials, poems, and wrote the book Mediation and Atonement, a major contribution to an understanding of the atonement of Christ, who is the Redeemer of mankind and mediator with the Father. One of his most courageous writings, however, came as a part of his calling in the eastern states. The doctrine of plural marriage had recently been announced, and to help curb the renewed surge of anti-Mormon sentiment, Brigham Young sent brethren to various cities around the country to set up newspapers and tell the Mormon viewpoint. John Taylor went to New York and located in the very heart of that city's newspaper world. Centered between the New York Herald and the Tribune, two of the most outspokenly anti-Mormon newspapers in New York, on the corner of Ann and Nassau Streets. And what did Mr. Taylor call his newspaper? Why, the Mormon. With a masthead filling at least 1/4 of the front page, Editor Taylor left no doubt in the reader's mind that he believed it is better to represent ourselves than be represented by others. We are Mormon, he declared in the first issue, inside and out, at home or abroad, in public and in private, everywhere. Well had he earned his unofficial title, Defender of the Faith. After returning to Utah once again, he was able to spend a little more time with his family as he filled various civic and territorial positions. Then, in 1877, John Taylor was called to the most important assignment in his church career. On August 25th, Brigham Young died, and as president of the Council of 12 Apostles, John Taylor assumed the leadership of the church. 3 years later, in the Tabernacle at October General Conference 1880, the new First Presidency was sustained by the separate priesthood quorums of the church, a procedure instituted by John Taylor, one of several procedural and organizational changes he made to meet the needs of a growing church, and one which is still observed. As church president, John Taylor faced challenges small and great. Each challenge, however, was met with the characteristic wit and forthrightness he had shown in his lifelong defense of the gospel. In 1882, after he had officially been president of the church for only 2 years, the church's very survival was threatened with passage of the Edmunds-Tucker Act in the United States Congress. Anti-Mormon sentiment had been growing steadily since the public announcement of plural marriage some 30 years earlier. The effect of that bill on church members was devastating. With the stroke of a pen, over 12,000 citizens lost their right to vote, to serve on juries, or to hold public office. Not only citizens who practiced plural marriage, but as the law was interpreted by federal officials, those who also simply believed in the practice. Furthermore, most church leaders went into hiding to avoid the possibility of life imprisonment under one judge's ruling, which could send them to prison for up to 5 years for each day that they lived with any one of their plural wives. Although the ruling was later declared unconstitutional, thousands of Mormon fathers did go to prison for conscience sake, as they expressed it. Perhaps no one was better prepared to defend the church at this time than John Taylor. Yet even his experience was little match for the onrushing tide of legal judgments. Even he found it necessary to go into hiding. In his last public appearance in February 1885, he asked,
"What would you do? Would you resent these outrages and break the heads of the men engaged in them? No, avoid them, just as you would wolves or snakes. But no breaking of heads, no bloodshed, rendering evil for evil. Let us try to cultivate the spirit of the gospel."
That night, following his sermon, President Taylor went into self-imposed exile in the homes of friendly saints. Despite the need for secrecy and limited travel, an amazing amount of correspondence and church business was carried out. Business and news was mostly done through the mail. Personal meetings were rare. The first presidency, for example, met only once at midnight during the 2.5 years of President Taylor's exile. And visits from family members were almost as rare. His love for and advice to them had to be conveyed through the mail, as in the letter that he wrote on his 78th birthday.
Some of you have written that you would like to have a peep at me. I heartily reciprocate that feeling and would like to have a peep at you on this occasion. But in my bodily absence, my spirit and peace shall be with you.
And characteristically rising above his problems, he advises,
if we are doing the will of the Lord, our persecutions and trials may be blessings in disguise. Our great Redeemer said, blessed are ye when men shall persecute you for my sake. Rejoice, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. We should feel, as Paul said in his day, for our affliction is but for a moment.
And perhaps the challenges and trials faced by John Taylor did seem to him but for a moment. For within that year his health began to fail, and on Monday, July 25th, 1887, his spirit slipped beyond the reach of his enemies. 76 years later, a tribute to John Taylor was published in the Congressional Record of the United States, where he was praised as a leader of his people, as a missionary who converted hundreds to the church in America, England, France, and other countries, as a journalist and editor, as a legislator, and as a devoted husband and father. But further, he was a strong and determined defender of human liberty. And so it was that President John Taylor would be considered a giant among men of any generation.
We are in the hands of God, and the nation is also in the hands of God, and we can do nothing unless he permits it. Neither can this or any other nation. He controls them according to the counsel of his own will, and he manipulates, manages, and directs the affairs of the children of men. He has appointed us to do a work. It is not our work, but we are willing to do it with his help. Will he be thwarted in his designs? I tell you, no. The kingdom of God will roll forth, and no man can stay it.